In the next couple of minutes, Hugh and I will break down the 5 key indicators that scream crash ahead, how they played out in the last 4 big crashes, and why 2025's rally, fueled by AI profits and government spending, might dodge the bullet until it doesn't. Grab yourself a notepad and let's dive in. Hugh is also including a full workbook so you can really learn what we're about to talk about here at felixprehn.org/crash. You can download that here. Here it is on the chat with all the information and sources and everything else. And for those of you who are serious about your stock portfolio, I'm also going to go one step further. A Saturday live training like I've never done before. Grab yourself a seat at felixprehn.org/training. The link is also down below in the description, and let's get cracking. What are crash indicators? Well, these metrics, that's a good idea, isn't it? Sit right in front of the camera. Right. These metrics flag when markets get too hot or the economy starts to wobble. Think of them as your car's warning lights before a breakdown. We have, number 1, the Shiller PE, which measures stock prices versus 10-year average earnings. Anything above 25 to 30 means stocks are pricey, a bit like paying $38 for $1 of profit. It signals overvaluation. The second indicator is the Buffett indicator, total stock market value divided by US GDP. Anything above sort of 150% means stock prices outpace the economy, which is basically a warning of a bubble. Number 3, unemployment. Low unemployment rate, but that's starting to creep up, just like the 4.2% we have right now. Hints that jobs are softening. Fewer jobs, less spending, weaker stocks, an early recession signal. Then we have the inflation rate, rising prices. At present, it's at 2.7%, according to the loons who come up with that data. And they eat away at your buying power. So anything above 2 to 3%, it pressures the Fed to hike rates, which would slow growth. And then we have the GDP growth. The economy's speed, anything below 2% flags weakness. Now, the forecast for next quarter is 2.5%. But weakness, just like before the 2008 slowdown, well, slow growth hurts corporate profits. Corporate profits dropping drags stock prices down. So how were these successful at flagging the last 4 crashes? And I'm going to put it all together for this particular one here. Well, let's see how these indicators lit up before the big ones. 1987 Black Monday. I was talking to one of my mentors about that because I was 7 years old at the time. He was about 70 years old at the time. We've got the dot-com bubble. I remember that. I started investing in 1999, 2008 financial crisis. I think most of us remember that. And then we have, of course, COVID 2020. So let's try to put the data here on the screen for you. The 1987 Black Monday crash, the Dow Jones index lost 22% in one day. Imagine how that feels if your portfolio is down 22% in one day. So how about the indicators? Well, the Shiller was at 18, not sky high, but the Dow Jones index had just shot up 44% in a few months. So there was some speculative fever out there. The Buffett indicator, well, actually, we haven't got data that old. So let's skip that one. We'll look at it for the next ones. Unemployment rate. It was low, but confidence was being shaken up. There was a job scare out there. Now that's all that was required. Inflation, well, it was moderate, but the dollar was falling just like it has just now, which added to volatility a little bit like today's tariff fears, right? Some parallels there. What about GDP growth? It was pretty decent, but they ignored it. Why? Because they were scared about the trade deficit shock and the whole other stuff that was going on in 1987. What about the dot-com bust? The NASDAQ dropped 78% over 2 years. How would you feel if your hard-earned portfolio dropped 78% over 2 years? Entirely avoidable, by the way. Entirely avoidable. And I could make another video on this, maybe, how losing all your money in a crash is entirely avoidable. But I'll teach you that on Saturday, even if you come and join me at felixprehn.org/training, we can throw that in easy. Now, dot-com bubble had a Shiller PE of 44, which was insanely high, right? So stocks were pricing in dreams, not profits. And then the Buffett indicator was 150%, generally a sign that there was hype rather than delivery. Unemployment, well, it was pretty low, but when the venture capital dried up, as rates were rising, the weak firms folded. And I remember this very distinctly. I was working in a .com company in Germany at the time, my first job. I was sitting in a very plush office, and literally, one moment, the CEO walks in and says, guys, our funding is stopped. And we were like, what do you mean? What do you mean? He's like, yeah, there's no more funding. So we're either going to fold by tomorrow, or someone's going to buy us or invest. And they did actually get taken over by somebody other, but I stopped working at that moment. So it happens just like that. And inflation, well, inflation wasn't that big of a problem, but because interest rates were so low, it was feeding the speculation, it was inflating the bubble. So very low interest rates can be a problem. What about GDP growth? Well, it was really strong until 2001, and then the slowdown was confirmed, and then the recession was officially there. The market tanked well before then. What about 2008? Minus 57% on the S&P. Ouch. Schiller was at 27, pretty high. Housing fueled overvaluation of everything. Buffett was at 120%, stretched, not crazy, but stretched. Unemployment was rising. It was 5% plus as the housing defaults were climbing. And inflation spiked to 5% by mid-2008. And that meant, well, rates would have to go up, and that kind of was the domino effect that knocked the whole thing over. Well, that and the massive fraud of, we shan't name them, but, the rating agencies, there are only two. Yes, fraud. Yes, brown envelope jobs. Absolutely. Of course, nobody can prove it, and I'm sure it never happened. So they say, but there you are. What about GDP growth? Well, it started to slow down by 2007, and therefore people were getting worried, and therefore we actually got a recession. That's all we need. What about COVID? Well, COVID was a bit different. The S&P dropped 34% in 33 days. So yes, it didn't all happen in one day, by the way. These things, you still have time to act. Come and learn that with me on Saturday. So basically a percentage point down every day on average. The Schiller PE was 32, which is pretty high. The Buffett indicator was 140%, which was kind of bonkers, right? And unemployment was low, but then the lockdowns obviously spiked unemployment to bizarre levels. Inflation was low, but the confidence was taken away. Oil prices, we were worried about that. Obviously, COVID virus, we were told we would all die by tomorrow unless we wore a mask and wired some money over to Pfizer. Sorry, they didn't say that, did they? Unless we got a life-saving injection. Right, what about GDP growth? It was pretty good, but it collapsed on the shutdown. So that was kind of more like a man-made collapse. It's not your typical cycle. So let's come finally to 2025, and I hope we put in some timestamps here for those of you who haven't got the patience to run through it all. But there are lessons in history, right? That's why I have mentors who are 20, 30, 40, 50 years older than me, because I can learn from what they've seen, which we haven't seen yet in this generation. The market is at record highs. Schiller PE is 38. The Buffett indicator is at 207%, which sounds like a crash setup, right? But here is why this rally might keep running until the music does stop. Unlike the .com's profitless startups, the Magnificent Seven stocks, think Microsoft, Nvidia, etc., are cash machines. They're making real profits. Microsoft's last quarter made 76 billion in revenue. Azure, their cloud computing, is up 39% on strong AI demand. So this isn't sort of let's build a website and put .com in the title and let's see what happens and maybe we'll figure out how to make money at some point. That was 1999, right? Meta, for example, they were like, I've never thought about making money. We were just building this thing. Worked out for Meta, but not for many others. And we have some policy rocket fuel. Trump's 2025 tax cuts, corporate breaks, senior deductions, deregulation, a 3 trillion plus deficit is just spending juice for the economy. So Q2, 3% growth, beat forecast. The stimulus basically keeps the party going. It's very hard to fall into a recession with a deficit the size of the one that the US is running right now. But valuations are nuts, right? Schiller is at 38, Buffett at 207%, screams overvaluation. It's higher than 2008. It's higher than 2020. It's higher than 2000. So if the AI hype fades or earnings miss, we're going to hit the ground pretty hard. But the earnings we just got were tremendous. The best earnings we've seen ever, said Donald Trump, right? Of course, it's all because of him. If it hadn't been, it would have been a Biden earnings season. Now, there are, however, some cracks in the economy. Unemployment is ticked up to 4.2%. GDP forecasts are now forecasting a dip to 2.5%. Inflation is still at 2.7%. No one thinks the Fed's going to hike, but there are some cracks, right? The tariff scare is shaking the market. It seems pretty like shake-proof at this point because we kind of seen this playbook now. Trump comes out and says 100% tariffs on bananas tomorrow, and then in reality, everybody who grows bananas is exempt because they sent him a banana cake. You know, it's a little bit how it works. So, in my humble opinion, markets don't crash out of nowhere. Shiller, PE, Buffett indicator, unemployment, inflation, GDP, they give you a dashboard, and they flashed red before 87, 2000, 2008, and 2020. And they're blinking a little bit now. But AI profits, government policy are keeping the party alive. So yes, watch these metrics. That's what the workbook's for. And don't get too comfy. Never do. Never assume tomorrow's going to be great. But more money has been lost and sitting on the sidelines waiting for a crash than in actual crashes. And whose quote is that? Peter, what's his name? Somebody remember it. Put it in the comments down below, please. My brain is obviously not where it's meant to be this morning. What's his name? Peter Lynch. That's the one. Peter Lynch. So am I in the market? Yes. Am I fully invested? More or less. But I move around sectors. And to me, that's the smart way of playing it. We don't just want to be always just in the one thing that's grabbing the headlines. We want to move around as the industry and as the sector and as the phases and the patterns do their thing, because the market works in patterns. And once you understand how they work, you can move with the patterns. And in my humble opinion, it's a pretty good thing to do. So don't run for the hills. Don't watch lots of panic videos. Hopefully this, together with the workbook, together with Saturday's live training, will give you so much information and skill that you'll be better than 99% of people out there. And you'll actually have risk management. And the real risk management out there is always stops, right? You need to learn how to set those exactly. And I did why I'm looking a bit disheveled is I just come from a tennis lesson. My first adult tennis coaching ever. I think my last coaching session was when I was 12, and that was the sort of group things we did as kids. And I was like, why the heck did I do this earlier? Because this is a complete game changer, literally. Complete freaking game changer. I was doing everything wrong. Everything was terrible. And now everything is going to be wonderful. Not in one session, obviously. I don't expect that. But let's do 20, let's do 30, let's do 50. Let's keep it going. Let's do it every week. And I'm going to get better and better and better. And it'll be more and more fun. Same thing applies to money. Any skill can be learned. There are people out there who know how to do it. This guy is a tennis pro from the US. So he knows how to play tennis like 1,000 times better than me. And yes, I could have gone to somebody who's just a little bit better than me, but why not just go for perfection? I mean, perfection is not the right word, but why not just learn from somebody who actually knows what they're doing? And that's what I've always done. And I'm a big believer in that. So I've got coaches in every aspect of my life. I'd recommend you do the same thing, start learning. But free YouTube videos are a good place. They'll only get you so far. To be perfectly honest with you, I've watched most of them. I've read most of the books. It only gets you so far. What really got me further is somebody looking at my portfolio and going, why have you got that, Felix? And I'm like, I don't know. And that sort of like brings in a new reality. And then we replace that with actual rules and systems and structures. And it gives you beautiful confidence. And I've never slept better. And it's a beautiful feeling. It is a beautiful feeling. So come and join me Saturday, felixfrancelog.com/training. And if you got some value out of this, share it with a friend or a cat. All the best. Felix here, and Winston has just sniffed out that Alex Karp has given us his buy list for his favorite stocks. Well, in fact, he is actually quite right. There was a list hidden in the earnings presentation, which shows which companies are good and which companies are terrible, according to Palantir.